Hello again. Now, on this video, I want to talk about a subject that's quite dear to my own heart because it's something that's troubled me a lot, and that's the subject of health anxiety. I've made references to this in my other videos, but in this video I wanted to talk about it in some more detail because it's quite a common problem for an anxiety sufferer. Now, anyone in an anxiety state obviously is going to have a certain amount of concern for their health, because even if they're aware of what's happening to them and they're aware of what the anxiety symptoms all mean, they're still going to worry about the effects of these symptoms over time. And in an anxiety state, one lives in a kind of state of constant readiness, preparedness for danger. All these symptoms have descended upon the sufferer, and naturally enough he wonders what earth is going to come next. And being in that state kind of lends itself to always being on the lookout for changes in what's currently happening, or for variations or new things, and naturally one's health becomes quite a major preoccupation. Now, I started, when I was first ill when I was 18, I started down that road really because of lack of information. When I had my first panic attack, and when I tried to find out from doctors, what was wrong with me, I got absolutely nowhere. And very unwisely, as it happened at the time, I tried to find out for myself. Now, information was pretty scarce, and my only source of information was the local library. So I started to try and find out from that, and the other source of information I tried, very, very unwisely, was an old medical textbook that we had in the house. And in the state of mind I was in at that time, very suggestible, I began to imagine I had everything under the sun wrong with me. Now, this kind of developed over a period of weeks until I couldn't reason with it anymore, and in spite of numerous consultations with a doctor who couldn't understand why I was getting so upset about these fears that I had, it did nothing to kind of relieve the tension, relieve the fear. And this is something too that is still with me, and it varies according to circumstances. And clearly, since I suffered a stroke in 2012, my focus has been much more on possible physical problems. And like I say, it varies according to how much sort of stress I'm under at any given time. Now, this is why, since an anxious person is at a distinct disadvantage, anyone can be concerned about their health. Anyone could possibly be called a hypochondriac to some degree, but insofar as the way they react to physical illness. But an anxiety sufferer is at a considerable disadvantage because their nervous system is sensitized, which means all their fears are magnified. So even if they weren't particularly concerned about their health before, they can suddenly become concerned about it now because of the intense physical reactions they get to these frightening thoughts. And again, because of the magnitude of these feelings they're getting, they think that the thoughts are important, and of course, they stick. The thoughts stick, and they keep coming back again and again until the person is convinced that they have to be right. These thoughts have to be right, which simply isn't true. So that's how easily it can happen. It did with me, because I didn't have the answers and I tried to find them out myself, and I got completely off the track, completely confused and just upset and bewildered and frightened, very, very frightened, because I was sure there was something wrong with me. I mean, I was only 18 at the time, but that, it didn't make any difference. There was nothing there to explain the way I felt, and so I made up my own version, kind of thing. Now, health anxiety as such is not really any different from any other fear that an anxiety sufferer may have. But obviously, because it's focused on yourself rather than some external thing that you're frightened of, it can be a lot stronger and a lot more persistent, and can affect every single area of a sufferer's life. Now, if I look right back, I mean, in the past, at times when I wasn't sensitized, I didn't particularly like it when I got ill with anything, but I was a bit more accepting of it than I am now, certainly. And oddly enough, when I suffered my stroke, I mean, when it happened, I was shocked, really shocked. I was very scared because I didn't know what it was that was happening to me. It could have been anything. I just didn't know. But once I knew, what the forecast was, what the development of it was like to be, I accepted it and I calmed down quite considerably. And for quite some time after that, my attention was on my balance because of the effect my stroke had on it. But other things kind of took a back seat because I had one sort of point of focus. But in recent times, and this is especially true during the dark winter months, I find this, that I find on a daily basis I'm studying myself to see what it is that I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing. And this is how it works. When your mind is like that, when you're very suggestible, if something that attracts your attention, some ache or pain or feeling, the answer your mind comes up with is always the worst case scenario. So, for example, if I get a headache, or if my balance gets particularly bad, then it's another stroke happening, possibly. None of this is helped by these endless public information films they put on, the signs of the stroke, etc., etc. If they're trying to scare people, they're doing a good job. So, I mean, that's how it is for me. Every single day there's a degree of that, even when I'm even if I'm busy for whatever reason. There's this constant searching for something to worry about, basically. Examining the way you feel in great detail, and worrying about it, and making up all sorts of stories about what could be wrong. It's obviously a complete waste of time, because it's not all your what-if thoughts, as with any subject that they cover. They're not giving any information. They're not telling you anything useful. Nothing you need to know. They're just speculations at best. Just wild speculations, you could say. And there's no sort of source of great information that they're drawing upon. They can pick up on the most ridiculous little snippets of information that you might have in your mind, and turn it into a fact, turn it into a possibility. Just ridiculous little scraps of information that you might have acquired over the years. And so they're hardly a balanced judgment. So from that point of view alone, they're just something you ignore, that, or you humour. You just say yes, okay. But you're not. As you learn the techniques that I've talked about in these videos, then you begin to learn not to be so impressed by what these thoughts are telling you. Now, as I said, with me, the winter months have always been the worst time. The dark, cold winter months, the days that we have in the winter. In the summer, in spring and summer, I automatically start to feel better. And one of the main effects, I mean, apart from being scared, as I still get by some of these thoughts, because despite what I just said about what-if thoughts, I do get caught out by them, and I do find myself thinking, well, yeah, that might be true, whereas I really should know better by now. So, but as we head into spring and summer, these thoughts still come, but I don't pay so much attention to them. I'm much more outward looking, and I feel genuinely much happier. And that's another feature, apart from the fear that this kind of fear has, this kind of phobia has. It's so depressing as well, because if you get caught up in it for any length of time, it's so easy to believe that you're dying. It's so easy to think that you have something incurably wrong with you. And even if you go to the doctor, and even if you have test after test, you still can come away thinking, well, they might have missed something, or they might have misinterpreted something, or that's the way your mind works. When you're frightened, you always think of the worst possible outcome. So it can be an extremely tiring, trying, and depressing fear to have, because it never really leaves you. It's there the whole time, nagging away at you, and you're trying to reason with it, trying to rationalise it, and depending on how sort of sensitised and how depressed you are, it's easier or it's not so easy. Sometimes it's very difficult indeed to reason with these thoughts. Now, I mean, sometimes you can see the funny side of things. Sometimes you can, if you're in a better frame of mind, you can say, oh, this is just stupid thoughts that don't mean anything. And you can kind of laugh at your own particular behaviour, like for example, me, I wear this when it's cold. Well, I mean, not when it's cold. I wear this scarf a lot of the time because my neck here is very susceptible to drafts, and I get a stiff neck, and it's very painful. But I find myself it's like almost like a comforter. I wear this thing just to okay, what if I get a draft on my neck? I'm going to get a stiff neck. Oh no. And it's just, when I think about it like that, I think, well, it's a bit silly, isn't it? But I mean, it kind of serves its purpose, I suppose. I mean, where I live here, it's a pretty drafty house, so it's quite sensible, really. But yeah, I mean, it starts, for most people who have this, it starts with them every single day when they wake up, even before they wake up, practically when they come to, and just when they open their eyes, they start to think and study themselves and think, what's happening today? And like an example, like this morning, when I woke up, my chest felt a bit funny here. Sorry, microphone. My chest felt a bit funny here, and I thought, ooh, don't like the feeling of that. Don't like that at all. And I came down, and it was still. It wasn't exactly a pain. It was a kind of. I think what it was, I'd been breathing through my mouth in the night, and my chest was a bit dried out. But as I said, with all these things, your mind starts working away, and oh God, supposing I get a chest infection. Now, I did have a chest infection back in the summer, and it was pretty miserable because I went for about a week and I hardly had any sleep because I was coughing all night. So the thoughts turned to, oh God, supposing I'm getting something like that again. Oh no, I can't cope with that now. And if you're already in a sensitized frame of mind, the prospect of having some physical illness to deal with on top of that, naturally, I mean, it's going to be depressing, isn't it? It's going to be frightening. You feel like you can't, it's more than you can cope with. And that's what it is. It's this feeling of not being able to cope. you're under stress already, you're frightened already. You don't need extra things to add it to that. So if there's a threat of some physical problem occurring, then of course you're going to feel like that. Of course you're not going to want it to happen. You're not going to feel willing to accept it, and that's why it can get very trying at times. Yeah. So I mean, that my chest feeling, whatever it was, that kind of wore off, and then I started looking for something else. And then my neck muscles, as I was just talking about, my neck muscles started to sort of tighten up on one side and then the other, and my dizziness is always a good, a good standby. I mean, even when I'm at home, it can be quite significant when I try and walk around the house, and I'm kind of almost bouncing off the walls, or I'm walking in a kind of drunken fashion, and it fluctuates how much I worry about it according to what's happening and how I feel generally. It's always worse when I'm tired. All fear's always worse when you're tired, physically tired. So that dizziness thing is always a major issue with me, because what happened to me. And as I've explained in other videos, it's become worse because it's become a focal point of attention with me. My balance has become a focus, and I've concentrated on it so much. So, that's how it goes on, and this is, I'm sure, how a lot of people with this particular phobia feel. They're just obsessed with health matters, obsessed with things being wrong with them, and it's always the fear is of something drastic, something bad, something serious, even terminal. And because I remember clearly how it developed in me when I was 18, I can bring a bit of reason to it, because I saw for myself at that time just how the fear developed, and it was just misinformation. I was getting information, getting it all out of context. I had no way to reason with it. I didn't have any other facts at my disposal, so I couldn't think it through and reason with it. There was nothing else there, nothing else available, and so I came to all sorts of ridiculous conclusions about what was wrong with me. I mean, the same thing, you can do the same thing now, only on a much grander scale, because we've got Google. So if you type in symptoms into Google, you get millions of pages telling you what these symptoms might mean. And I made it a policy for myself, or at least in recent years, that I never ever Google symptoms unless it's something quite innocuous, like for example, I had a tendon. I did something to my Achilles tendon in the summer, and every morning when I used to get up, it was incredibly painful to stand on it, and it used to wear off gradually as I moved. But I mean, this was muscular, obviously, my tendon, and something that happened to it. So I allowed myself the luxury of Googling that one just to see how it was described and what I could expect. But I didn't do it in a kind of frightened way. I wasn't frightened of that, because it seemed quite obvious what it was. It was a muscular thing. It was my tendon. I couldn't think of anything else that it could be. So, like I said, I just looked up briefly some information, but other than that, unless it's something, like I say, that seems fairly innocent, I make myself never look up medical things on Google. Never. Because that just feeds the fire. It just sets your mind off going in all different directions, and ultimately, like I said, you come to the conclusion that you're dying. So no, that's to be left alone. No, that's what it's like. I mean, it's with me all the time, and it's been with me for so many years in one form or another. I mean, it's gone off at times, in my happier times when I've not been sensitized, it's it's taken quite a back seat. But I mean, it links in with my other fear that I've had, which I've talked about, which is fear of vomiting, because that's a health matter. And a lot of the health fears I have now, are always connected to that. So, in other words, if I have a symptom or a feeling that I think might be associated with vomiting, then it's going to be more fearful for me. Of course it is. Now, this all can seem like a huge waste of time, because you're not actually doing anything. I mean, if you feel compelled to see the doctor about it, then that's fine. I mean, lots of people kind of spend their lives at the doctors because of this, and the danger then becomes that if you do that and go to the doctor and keep on complaining about one thing after another, they're just going to kind of mark you down as just a hypochondriac who should be basically ignored. So if you happen to go along with you do actually have a real problem, they're going to likely trivialise it and not give it proper respect. You like to think that doctors are kind of impartial and objective, but if they've got you kind of classified as a certain type, then that could be the result. I mean, in a sense, that's kind of what happened to me, because being an anxiety sufferer, I used to see my doctor at fairly regular intervals. And in all the time that I saw her, well, at least in the 2 years prior to my stroke, not once did she take my blood pressure. And for somebody of my age and my circumstances, you would have thought that, as a matter of course, she would have done that. And had she done so, she would have found that my blood pressure was getting very high, and some treatment might have been given before I actually had the stroke. But as it happened, I had the stroke, and then they discovered my blood pressure was very high, and so something that could have been avoided. But that was because when I was just an anxiety sufferer going to see my doctor, the attitude was very different. It was kind of just barely tolerated you and not offering much in the way of help and advice. Whereas when I went with a tangible physical problem, i.e. the stroke, the attitude was completely different. Doctors seem to have problems, at least general practitioners do, seem to have problems with anxiety issues, at least all the ones I've ever seen. And that is the trouble. If you're labelled in such a way, you're labelled a hypochondriac, and it's a difficult kind of thing to get past if your doctor is seeing you in that way. So, how do you actually determine if you really do have a problem? I mean, this is the crucial question. How are you supposed to know if what you're feeling is something that merits attention? Now, obviously, because I suffered a stroke, I'm in a position to kind of explain how I saw it from my own point of view. When I had the stroke, and what happened was my left eye wouldn't turn to the right. It just stayed looking ahead. So when I tried to move my eyes, one of them moved, but the other one didn't. So I had terrible double vision, and as a result of that, my balance just, was all over the place. Now, when it first happened, for a brief time, I thought to myself, well, maybe this is just some horrible new anxiety experience, because I'd had so many. But pretty soon I realised that something was amiss, and I sought medical help. My wife agreed, and then find out. But it was, I kind of knew instinctively that I had to do something about this, but it wasn't just something that was going to wear off. And I think this is it. I think you have a kind of inbuilt wisdom to know if you genuinely have a physical problem. And if it's something, the thing with anxiety is that the feelings you get can persist, but they change. They can move around, and they can be in different combinations, different places in your body. And you know from the duration, if there was something really wrong, then if it was a pain or a sensation of some kind that persisted, and that is the thing. If it went on for week after week, then you need to go and check it out. I mean, if you're worried anyway, I think whatever doctors might think, if you're worried anyway, and you feel you want to do it, go along and check with your doctor, of course. Don't sort of suffer just for the sake of it. It could be something that could be, easily explained, or some condition that's just temporary. But if you want reassurance, then go seek reassurance, of course. Don't just sort of soldier on, hoping everything's going to be all right. But when I suffered that stroke, I knew straight away that something was wrong, because I couldn't move my head. And the doctor who came out first, he came in and checked my eye movement, and he spotted it straight away. And on that basis, he organised an ambulance to come and take me into hospital, which is what happened. But like I said, once it happened, I kind of calmed down immensely, and I accepted it. The content of the fears that you can have just can vary so much from day to day, from hour to hour even. You can focus on so many things, so many anxiety symptoms that you can have. The more attention you give them, obviously, the more they seem, the worse they seem, the more intense they become. And this, it's just a feature of it. It's like you set up this kind of feedback loop where you worry about the anxiety symptom, and the symptom grows more intense because of it, and so on. The cycle continues and continues until it really gets bad. So, but ultimately, what you have to do is what I did when I suffered my stroke. I realised that something had happened to me. It had happened, and there was no going back from it. So all I could do was accept it. I couldn't just sort of sit around miserably and curse my fate. I knew that I had to try and adapt. I had to change and adapt my life to what had happened. And it was very strange how my mental attitude changed after that, because it was like, I think so much of the health fear that people who suffer from it have, so much of it is just the unknown. It's not quite knowing for sure what is actually happening, what it might be. I mean, unless you're a medically trained person, which I'm not, you won't have the medical knowledge to be able to tell what is actually going on with you. And this can be a big problem. A little, like the saying goes, a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing, because that's one of my reasons I don't Google things, because it's a little knowledge. You get some bit of information, and you can take it completely out of context and get it completely wrong. Just another example of this, I talked about the what-if questions, and that they come upon information in some extraordinary ways. Like, for example, in the months following my stroke, I saw a number of different doctors. But on one occasion, I saw this particularly unpleasant one who'd actually had a stroke himself. And I was still in a kind of suggestible frame of mind, still kind of adapting to what had happened. And I made the mistake of asking him how it affected him, his stroke. And then he told me what symptoms he'd experienced prior to it, and how he'd somehow managed to drive himself to the hospital and get it sorted. Now, this is a doctor. I mean, he had the medical knowledge and the training But what he told me is is something that I've had, and something that I do still occasionally get. And every time I get it, his words come back to me in the form of a what-if question. So what if what this doctor had is happening to you now? What if it's another stroke? See, it's just a stupid bit of information that is completely out of context and form the basis of, a fear, just a stupid fear. I could cite a number of different other examples, like there's another one I had that when I was some years ago, with my fear of vomiting, some years ago I was working in an office, and there was a stomach bug that went round, and it was picking people off one by one, it seemed. And I mean, I wasn't in such a sensitized state then, I wasn't that scared, but I still didn't want to get this damn thing, whatever it was. And something later, I seem to have gotten away with it because lots of people had been off sick and I was still alright. But then one day I started to get a kind of cramping in my stomach, and I couldn't eat properly, and eventually it did actually result in me getting this stomach bug, and it made me sick. And like I said, at the time I wasn't that upset by it. I didn't like it by any means, it was very unpleasant. But having had that, and having had the forerunners to that, and remembering it very clearly as I do, if I get anything that's even remotely like that, as far as my stomach's concerned, like any sort of cramping feeling and tightness, I mean, that's a very common experience with your stomach, is to get tight muscles in your abdomen because of tension. If I get things like that and I think, oh my God, it's that, I'm going to get that again, and, off you go again, worry. And so basically what I'm saying is that all these thoughts that come to your mind, if you really analyse them and look at them and think, is there any even remote chance that this what-if thought, or however it's phrased, is there even a remote chance that it's right? And if you really look at it, you think, no, it's not right. And this is how I can kind of work with this kind of process, these constant questions that come into my mind. So basically it all goes back to what I've talked about all through these videos. It's learning how to face up to these thoughts, face up to the fears, and then just accept that they are coming, but you don't have to take them seriously. They have no special source of knowledge and information to draw upon, and they, like I said, they just pick up on random facts sometimes. So, as with any fear, it's learning how to accept, and it's learning how to not give them any importance. Let them come, let them go, because you can't switch them off. You can't just suddenly stop them coming. Yes, you can get reassurance, of course you can, if you need to put your mind at rest on a specific issue. Of course, that's common sense. But for the rest of the time, you can just kind of think, oh, it's just this rubbish going through my mind again, so what? And, this is basically what I do, and just about every day I go through a kind of session of one thing in particular gets my attention, and I worry unduly about it. So, the possibilities for being afraid are endless, really, when you think about it, because there's so many, so much thrown at you. So many frightening facts, so-called, are thrown at you from the media. All these weekly magazines, even the daily papers have all these medical studies they're reporting on all the time, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. There's all these horror stories you read in the weekly magazines saying all sort of dreadful things that have happened to people. There's all this barrage of information being thrown at you the whole time as to all the things that could go wrong, all the terrible diseases and illnesses. I mean, media love to whip up a frenzy over these things, like they do like they have done with the Ebola crisis, and they did a couple of years ago with the swine flu and stuff like that. They love to stir people up. They love to frighten people, even people who don't have a phobia about bad health. They can get them scared, get them really scared. So, well, it's like I say, health anxiety is nothing special. It can be a bit more stubborn. It can be much more pervasive than some phobias because of what it's about. But the treatment is still the same. You still have to do what I said. Just face, accept, and let the fears come. And also, you can begin to see the pattern with yourself. You begin to see exactly how it manifests itself with you, and you can look back and remember all the other previous fears that have come and how they've all come to nothing. I mean, this happens to me all the time, especially over nausea, because the way I feel about it. And it's like I put myself through it deliberately just to kind of feel the relief afterwards. I have times when I get very nauseous and very upsetting, and afterwards I can look back and think, you've just been caught out again. It's the same old stuff, just the same old stupid thoughts. So it's like I say, when something real actually happens, you don't. Once you get over the shock of it, you don't fear it anymore, because it's happened, and you have no alternative but to accept that it has happened. And you can tear yourself up trying to get, feeling sorry for yourself, but that's not going to help, is it? You have to then move forward from that and learn what you need to do to adapt to the change in circumstances. And that's what I've been doing. So, all the things I think of, I have an aunt who's 85 now, and she's kind of a walking medical textbook because of all the things she's had. Through her life, she's had just about everything. She must have a huge medical file. But for all the things that she's had wrong with her and all the stuff she's been through, she's 85 now, and she's still going strong. So, there's no telling, is there? So, anyway, I thought I'd like to just cover this area a bit and talk about my own experience, because it certainly is a fear that many people do have, but it's also a fear that you can deal with. Anyway, I think it's probably long enough now before I start repeating myself yet again, as I tend to do. So until the next time, thank you as always for watching, and I'll talk to you again.